Hi, I'm Ryan from RTINGS.com. Today, we'll be comparing the performance of the LG C1 and the Samsung QN90A. We'll be evaluating both of these on our standardized test bench to see how they compare and which one you should buy. We bought and tested the 55-inch of each model. We expect both of these to be representative of the other sizes in the lineup. The LG C1 is a versatile OLED TV with many of the pros and cons that come with that type of panel. But how does it compare to Samsung's Quantum Dot Mini LED QN90A? Let's find out. You can also find other videos we've done comparing the C1 OLED to the Sony X90J and a comparison between the Samsung QN90A and the QN85A in the links in the description below. The stands of both TVs differ a bit. They are both center mounted, but the LG's is quite a bit wider than the small footprint of the iMac style stand of the Samsung. Even though the footprint is quite a bit smaller, the QN90A doesn't wobble too much more than the solid C1. The inputs of both TVs point sideways for the most part, which is good for when the TV is placed close to a wall. The LG C1 does have some rear mounting inputs as well though, which isn't ideal for some setups. The range of ports is very similar with 4 HDMI ports, USB ports, and an optical connection for an external sound system. The big difference here is while the QN90A has an HDMI 2.1 port for new devices, the C1 has 4, and we'll talk about the impact of this later in the comparison. Each of these TVs has a different styled back, and includes VESA mounting holes if you want to put them on the wall. The OLED sports a super thin top back thanks to the inherent thin construction of the OLED panels that don't need a backlight. The QN90A has a more typical uniform shape and size and is sleek in its own right. They both channel cables to the back center of the stand for cable management. The build quality of both TVs is great. Although the Samsung is made mostly out of plastic, it feels very well built. In contrast, the LG has more metal and glass in its design. Both are well put together and aren't concerning at all. Now, let's compare them in our tests. A high contrast ratio results in deep dark scenes, which is good if you want to watch movies in a dark room like a home theater environment. The Samsung QN90A features a VA-type panel with optical filters to enhance viewing angles, and the LG C1 is an OLED TV, which has a completely different panel technology. Since OLEDs can turn off individual pixels that emit light, the black level is inky black. In comparison, the VA with an optical filter has a lower than average contrast ratio. Local dimming is a feature to further improve dark scenes for a better movie watching experience. The Samsung's mini LED backlight and local dimming algorithm help improve the perceived contrast ratio, but the C1 has what can only be described as pixel-perfect local dimming, since each pixel is controlled individually. Both have great contrast ratios, but this is definitely one aspect where the OLED is the clear winner. On the other hand, if you want to use the TV in a bright room, then a high peak brightness is important to overcome glare. This is where the LED TV has the upper hand, as the Samsung gets very bright and can overcome most lighting conditions. The C1 gets bright, but it isn't quite suitable for bright viewing environments. Also important for a bright room is good reflection handling, especially when watching dark scenes where the brightness can't compensate. Take a look at the reflection photos of both TVs. They have a similar mirror effect and reduce the intensity of light considerably. The QN90A has the great anti-reflective layer we've seen on Samsung's, which are some of the best anti-reflective coatings we've seen. The Samsung has a rainbow effect though on bright objects that are pointed at the screen or are in the reflection from your seating position, and can be more distracting than on the OLED. Only you know your room setup, so this might not even be an issue if you only have indirect lighting brightening up your room. As I said previously, the Samsung gets much brighter, so coupled with the reflection handling, it can definitely overcome glare. The OLED's mirror-like reflections and purple hue aren't for everyone, and it doesn't get quite bright enough for rooms with lots of ambient light. Overall though, they should each be a good option for an average room with ambient light, but the Samsung has the leg up here. If you've got a wide seating arrangement or like to watch TV with family and friends, then good viewing angles help to ensure no one's left with washed out colors or crushed details. The Samsung is a VA-type LCD TV, and this usually means that the viewing angles are narrow. In the case of the QN90A, it has a wide viewing angle layer that helps spread the light output horizontally for better viewing angles. It does a decent job, and it's better than most VA-type TVs. The OLED creates its own light from each subpixel, so the light comes off the screen at much wider angles, so the C1 has outstanding viewing angles and is better than the Samsung in this regard. An overall uniform screen brightness and color is important when watching sports or playing video games to avoid the appearance of clouding known as the dirty screen effect or DSE. This does vary between units, but the models we bought are in line with what we expect. The C1 has a much cleaner panel with more uniform color and almost no DSE. The QN90A, on the other hand, has darkened edges in comparison, and there is some DSE at the center of the screen. This isn't great for sport lovers or gamers. If you plan to watch newer high dynamic range or HDR content, then vivid colors are important to produce highlights that really pop. The QN90A has a quantum dot layer that aims to increase the intensity of specific colors to produce vivid colors, and it does a great job. The C1 has almost the same gamut though, so both provide rich saturated colors in newer HDR content. The advantage of the Samsung is that it can continue displaying very saturated colors as the TV gets much brighter, meaning it has a better color volume than the OLED, again, important for HDR content. Good gradient performance comes from how a TV is able to process a signal, and in this case results in a smooth display without color bands or rings. For example, a sunset scene in a movie. Both TVs perform great, and there's really not much of a noticeable difference between them. They both feature settings to help smooth out gradients further as well. When playing video games, a fast response time is important for the clearest image without distracting blur. The OLED once again has an advantage here. The Samsung uses LCD technology, which has to physically change states to let different amounts of light through. This results in slower response times than the OLED, but it is still great for a TV. Since the OLED still has to hold the image on screen for a while after instantaneously changing because of the frame rate of the content, a phenomenon known as sample and hold, the resulting blur you see in the image makes it look quite similar to the QN90A. Therefore, either are a good choice, but the OLED is still better. Do note, because of this fast response time, the OLED has more jarring stutter in panning shots. Not everyone enjoys this effect, and it can only be remedied by applying motion interpolation. A low input lag is also important for a responsive feel when playing video games, and again, these TVs are extremely similar. The very small difference isn't noticeable, and they are virtually the same. Speaking of gaming, a big difference between these TVs is again related to the newer HDMI 2.1 support. This allows them to support high bandwidth signals from a new Xbox, PS5, or graphics card. The QN90A only has one of these ports, while the C1 has 4, so if you have more than one HDMI 2.1 device, the Samsung is limiting. This isn't so good if you care about future-proofing. If you don't game though, this is a non-issue. Both TVs also support variable refresh rate technologies for tear-free gaming. These TVs do run different platforms for their smart interface. The C1 uses WebOS, while the QN90A comes with the Tizen smart interface. They are both well fleshed out and support a wide variety of apps, are easy to use, and are responsive. I want to point out that the LG uses a Wii Remote style magic pointer to navigate the menu, which is nice, but it has a larger and busier remote than the small, sleek Samsung remote. Now, lastly for the sound. Both TVs have similar performance overall, with the OLED sporting slightly lower bass and a flatter sound profile. They are pretty good and can be suitable for casual viewing, but definitely a tier below dedicated speaker systems or a soundbar. So, this brings us to the main question. Which one should you buy? In most cases, the LG C1 is the better TV. It has a better contrast ratio, response times, and viewing angles. But it is definitely better suited for medium to dark room environments where you can really take advantage of the deep inky black level. As long as you remotely vary the content you watch, burn-in won't be an issue. The QN90A, on the other hand, excels more in a medium to high brightness room where it can counteract glare and still deliver an excellent perceived contrast ratio and impactful HDR experience. It also doesn't have the potential problem of burn-in, so if you display the same content often, it's definitely the better option for you. Only you know your setup and utilization of the TV, so choose the one that better fits your needs.